Hello and good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to webinar week number 2 and day number 5. We are at Friday. It's almost the weekend. Thank you for spending your Friday afternoon with us if you're tuning in live right now, and thank you for watching if you are here on demand with us. So really excited and delighted today to be joined by two of my best friends in football and great friends of Beyond Pulse in Mr. Ruairi Lynch and Richie Scott. Obviously, Mark Wilson is here as well to offer his valuable insights and co-pilot this again with me. To the people listening right now, what we'd like you to do, again, based on the nature of this conversation, is pop up in the message box if there's anything specific that you want to ask or want to hear about from the boys. We're going to look today a little bit at debunking coach education myths, especially here in the US, and perhaps overcoming some barriers to entry for why people might have been a little apprehensive about going on their courses. And then with both Richie and Ruairi being professional coach educators as well as active coaches, looking at how we can apply those ideas in the environments within which you work. So super excited. The boys are full of knowledge, full of insight. Maybe some terrible accents and a little bit of bad banter as well as we go, but forgive them for that. I'm going to ask you guys if you could, Lynchy, we'll start with you to give a quick background, little intro, and then Richie, you afterwards.
Yeah, so obviously my name is Ruairi Lynch. I'm currently Director of Coaching on the boys side for PSA SDFC, which is in Northern New Jersey. And then I do coach education for US soccer in New Jersey as well, in terms of coaching the grassroots courses, so the 4v4 up to 9v9 and 11v11 and onto the D license. And then I'm also an assistant coach in NCAA Division 1 on the men's side with St. Peter's in Jersey City. So I've been over in the States coaching for about 10 years, give or take, and that's sort of my background as of now anyway.
Perfect. Scotty?
Yeah, all right. Hi. Yeah, so I mean, before I give you a little intro as to my coaching background and kind of what got me to kind of where I am now, just thanks to Mark and Tom. I know you guys have been putting some unbelievable coach education out there the last couple of weeks and working your socks off to get some brilliant presenters in. So I'm sure me and Lynch will do the best that we can to hopefully provide something that's insightful. But yeah, so background is 15 years of coaching now. Started at Newcastle United as a teen, really realizing that playing wasn't going to be something that I would be able to do professionally. So got into the coaching world pretty early, and being very much like Lynchy, been here for the last 10 years in the States. Bounced around a little bit in the beginning, had some time in Iceland, brilliant experience. And yeah, been with New York Red Bulls now for coming up to 4 years as a coach education manager. So that's basically overseeing the development of 160 staff currently. And I work in a team of 3 education managers. So we kind of tag team that to try and upskill coaches the best we can.
Perfect. Thank you, boys. For the benefit of people listening, what they have failed to allude to is that they both hold Federation A licenses and have gone through the new US soccer course design there, and also Premier diplomas from United Soccer Coaches. So in terms of the breadth of the conversation, we want to be able to unpack a little bit around experiences on all of those programs to be able to share with people that are listening if there's a consideration of going on those and kind of taking a foray into what those education programs might offer. So thank you, fellas. As you guys know, you've tuned into these, so you know what's coming next, but I want to do it today really giving a shout out to the coach educators. If that's going to be the basis of a large part of this conversation, I want you guys, if we could, and we'll tag team this a little bit because there might be duplicates, but I'd like you guys to give me your all-time all-star five-a-side team of coach educators. So either people that you've been taught by yourself as you've gone through the education pathway, people that you've worked alongside, or people that you have actively seen work in the field. Take it away.
I'll jump in. So obviously, when we knew this question was coming up, it was quite a fun actually process to think back and think about who both affected me in terms of directly educating, but where did I find a lot of resources? So I actually broke it down into, right, well, what are the number of things that make a good educator? So the X's and O's, the actual delivery method and the language used, depth of thinking, the pedagogy and how people learn, leadership, and then connecting with people. So one of the first books I was ever given as a coach was Tony Carr, obviously legendary West Ham academy manager, and the level of the X's and O's and the technical and the delivery of sessions and the focus on both the individual and how you could, the level of detail in terms of what surface they're using, and the way he got that across in a coaching manual was definitely eye-opening. So when I was starting off, you almost think you know what you're doing to begin, and then something like that really makes you take a step back and go, hang on, actually, this is coach education. I don't know what I'm doing right now. Dick Bates, obviously, Tom, you specifically, and Willow, I'm sure you've come across him, and Richie as well. His delivery and his language and his way to interact with individuals and take a topic, again, you think you know about, but to actually impart that knowledge and the language he uses to clear, concise, limited, and it just gets the point across. Like you watch those videos, again, you think you know what you're doing, and you see something like that, and it really puts everything into perspective of, right, that's where we need to be. I need to really, really up my game to even get close to what he delivers. Didier Deschambault then obviously did both me and Richie's A license as the lead instructor. Another one where you go up and you do a presentation, or you get on the tactics board and you deliver it and you think, all right, I've hit my points, I'm all right. And then the questions start. And the level of depth he goes into and really tries to get you to think blows your mind. So again, you thought about it from this perspective, and it might be, you thought it was a level of detail, and then all of a sudden it just goes further and further and further and further until you're set up at the tactics board, sort of like a deer in headlights, going, wow, like I've got a million things spinning in my head. And then you go back and you're up till 12 o'clock at the course, just thinking deep, and you're trying to grab them at lunch to go back into those details. And he really gets you to think about the game in a whole nuclear level, which was fascinating. Another one was Niall O'Regan. So he's obviously come in as the education officer at the FEI and really revamped all the coach education stuff in Ireland. A lot of people, especially even in the Republic, would go to Northern Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales to take their coaching licenses, because I think the Republic didn't have the reputation it does now. I know a ton of people now that speak very, very highly both of Niall as an educator and as a manager who oversees that, but also of the courses in the Republic and the level of detail they're going into, and their way of professionalizing. Also, they're one of the first courses to bring in continuous education and take out the pass-fail element, where it's go on the field, deliver this session, be perfect, or else come back. And they really broke it down into, all right, what are your competencies? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Are you good on the computer? Are you good at presenting? Are you tactical? Are you technical? What are your leadership skills? And really broke it down into trying to create an overall coach, rather than just, can you deliver a technical session that hits the points? And he was a big driving factor in that. And then the next two I sort of put into servant leadership and connection was obviously Sir Alex and John Wooden. Sir Alex obviously being, just an idol as a United fan growing up, and John Wooden is one I hadn't really heard of. He was a head coach for UCLA basketball for years and years and years. And again, not having grown up over in the States, I hadn't really heard about him, but nearly every book I read on leadership referenced John Wooden. And I was like, well, of all these leaders who are at the absolute pinnacle of their sport and their game, they reference him and look up to him and respect him, then they must be onto something. So I remember buying a couple of his books a number of years ago, and it was funny because a lot of the things I'd done to try and better myself in personal education at that stage was much more focused on the technical, tactical, X's and O's, on-field stuff. But a lot of his books was, right, well, what can we do for the person? What is the leadership? How do we develop rounded individuals? And if we do that, we're much more likely to get them to buy in and actually develop a program and a culture. And that was sort of the first time I scratched the surface a number of years ago on developing a culture in terms of the big picture and obviously the holistic approach to coach education. You know, I think if you were on a course with Tony Kyer, Dick Bay, Didier, Niall, John, and Sir Alex, you'd probably do all right at the end of it in terms of a career.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, mate. We will throw you under the bus, though, for not being able to count to 5, because that was very clearly 6. So, Scotty, maybe you need 4 so we can go 2-5 against 5s.
I was going to say Rory's going to beat me out anyway because he's got 6 players on the pitch. So there's a couple there that are actually shared between Rory and I. Dick Bate being one, somebody that's just, I mean, it's a shame that I really was upset that I never got a chance to meet Dick Bate, but just an absolutely incredible presenter. To Rory's point, just the clarity in his message was absolutely superb. Didier Chambron, somebody that massively influenced both of us on the A license, and to try and put it as simply as possible, he always showed you what the next level was. Now, the different people that I have to Rory, first one is Hemant Hallgrimsson. So Hemant's better known as being the dentist or the former national team manager of Iceland. So my time there was absolutely incredible. And although he's not a coach educator, he still taught me so much about the game. And the thing about Hemant was that he's probably taught me more indirectly than what he did explicitly. So just certain behaviors, characteristics that he had that were just really exceptional, and really similarly to Didier, just helped me to see really what a higher level looks like in the game. Next one, Gary Lewis. Had a chance to work with Gary Lewis for about a year. Gary moved on to work for Philadelphia Union for several years, and then just moved to Seattle Sounders now as the academy director there. Gary was just really a very nice character, you know, humble, kind, caring, excellent depth of knowledge about the game. And then the last one that I've got is Ricky King. When I first moved to New York Red Bulls, Ricky was coach education manager, along with Grant Finley. Fast forward a little bit of time, and I joined Ricky as another education manager, and then he quickly moved on to work for Whitecaps. So he's now the U17 coach at the Whitecaps, but again, as somebody that just has a great knowledge of the game, and certainly learned a lot from him in my time here. And just to round off this, you know, the common denominator, I think, between all of those people, and I say with exception to Dick Bay, just from never having had the chance to meet him, but the common denominator with all of them is just there's this real interpersonal connection, like this brilliant ability to connect with people, show genuine care, build trust quickly. And I know that you've had some great people on the webinars the last couple of weeks. I know John O'Sullivan was somebody that spoke about it quite a lot, about, you know, the interpersonal relationships and how important that they are. I think that these guys really just embody that a lot.
Yeah, and I'm gonna let Willow finish with 1 so we can get to 10. But before that, it'd be a real nice segue into the next question, which is going to be about how you, as we said, we kind of debunk those myths, and we make the educational environment one that people feel comfortable to be a part of. And as you've nicely alluded to, I think the characteristics and the humility and the personality that those people show are critical to that. So Willow, give us number 10. So we've got 2 5-a-sides.
I think most people expect me to go for the obvious candidates. Your McLarens, your Fergusons, your Kids, Harrisons, Jim Ryans, but I'm torn between 2 who have helped me understand the game to such a depth, and also made me feel very inadequate at times. It's Joe Sargison or Sean O'Driscoll, and I'm torn between both of them. I'm going to go with Sean because I think he was the kickstart and the kick up the backside that I needed to really start looking at the game differently. He got me into coaching mode. He got me into the layers behind why I was doing what I was doing on the field, how that manifested in other people's performances around me. And he started getting me to look at the analysis piece a lot more in depth, and like reverse engineering. It's like, right, pick apart this one moment that you had an impact on. I want you to pick it apart completely and rebuild it as you might want it to look, not from perfection, but how you could improve this particular phase or scenario. And he got me to do that in such a way that it transformed my way of thinking. I became less selfish about performance and more open-minded to the impact that others had on my performance and the impact I had on theirs. So Sean O'Driscoll makes up the two 5v5s.
Not a bad name to throw in there, mate. Some good experience to share from. Okay, so guys, we're going to shift into the conversation more around coach education and, again, the experiences that you both have been through. Obviously, looking at some of the people on the line, there's a pretty high depth of knowledge. One thing that we've been very clear about over the last few weeks is that there's always going to be something else that comes next, right? We're never going to be finished learning, and there's going to be a new chapter of each of our journeys. So obviously we three have A licenses, and there's going to be another step on that at some point. And for people that haven't yet finished that pathway, obviously there's more to come for them as well. So if you could just honestly unpack some of the apprehensions and fears that you might have had going into courses in the past based on rumors of what the environment was like, because I think it's important that everybody understands and appreciates that there is a shared experience here, and that perhaps some nerves and some apprehension is pretty common. So Richie, you want to start us off, mate?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I guess in short, I think that some of the experiences that have been had on coaching courses in the past is, and there's been this real shift in coaching education probably in the last few years as to going away from an assessment and a final assessment as to you're going to pass or fail based on how you do at this specific point in time, to now really encompassing a body of work. And I think that that's been a big difference, something not only personally that I've enjoyed, but I think that a lot of people enjoy it a little bit more now. It's a contribution of everything that you've experienced over the 6 months, 9 months of going through a course, and all the different ways that you've been able to contribute to that course and to help other people on it as well. Initially, I think I had the expectation that, from taking a UEFA B course back in 2012, I think it might have been, where it was very much that there's a solid line and you're either above it or you're not. And the pass rate was really brutal. I think maybe 3 people of 24 of us actually passed the course. So now at this point where, the expectation for me, certainly before I took the US Soccer B license a few years back, was that it was going to be very similar. Very long days, lots of assignments, and there is a lot of assignments on the courses. But I think what it is, it's actually there's less topics, and each topic is actually really stretched out a little bit further. So it gives you the opportunity to really get into the weeds of it a little bit more. And I think that's brilliant because you're able to really go much deeper, and then you think about the quality of your work, and then what's the next level. And we spoke about Didier earlier on, and can you level up? Can you always be looking for something that's a higher standard than what you're currently working at? And having this time on these assignments to dig in deeper and go deeper again, and then almost do the same assignment twice over even, gives you that chance to just keep going. And I think that really helps to steepen the learning curve. And one of the other things as well, I had an anticipation that you'd be up until 12, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning working on assignments, and it really wasn't like that, certainly in my experience on the A license. And if anything, you're actually more encouraged to go and have a drink at the bar with people at night time than you were to be staying up until 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And the reason I really loved that was because it showed that it was about the people and the connections that you had. We keep coming back to this idea of the game is about people and the relationships that you build. And I love the kind of transition that they've had into what you expected in the past, and then now how they're really making it a lot more about experiences and learning and sharing, collaborating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's worth a little asterisk there on it will still be so heavily influenced by the person who's driving the ship in the respective groups. And I think there's some layers where there's still there's certainly differences of inexperience between some group members, but as a whole, absolutely, I think what you've said is a perfect explanation to anybody that hasn't yet gone through it, of the new direction and the environment that people are very intentionally trying to create. So Lynchy, I'm going to ask you this, but Willow, I'd like you to jump in off the back of it, because I think there's a synergy between perhaps walking into a dressing room for the first time. So Rory, I want to ask you about the importance of the first day. So obviously what Richie said is there might be a little bit of apprehension based on stories you've heard in the past. Typically when you go into these environments, you two obviously had each other. There's various friends that we've all kind of met along the way that have shared part of the journey with us. But if you're going in and you're going in cold, and you're not fortunate enough to really have a network of people around you to share that experience with, how important is it to kind of go in and embrace the uncomfort of getting to know people and putting yourself out there and just trying to kind of cut through some of the apprehension that might be around the room?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously my A license, I knew a number of people on it, but for my B license, I was the only person there that I knew. I went in very much off the back of not knowing anyone. Not necessarily a myth, but it's a mindset that I know I suffered from, and people I've had conversations with are that you're not going in as a peer, that the people there are superior to you in some way, shape, or form, and the realization within a couple of days that the reason you were selected, because it's a pretty stringent selection process to even make the grade and get on the course. You're there on the back of your desire to learn, of what your previous experiences are and what you've carved out for yourself. So you're there off the back of your own work, and you deserve to be there. It's interesting, a couple of these licenses I was lucky enough to be on with some ex-pros, and they're usually the most down to earth and just sort of easygoing about the whole thing, because they have nothing to prove. They're very, open about it. They share their experiences with you. They are quite happy to sit and chat over lunch, whereas it's almost other people that are very defensive and almost have to try and prove they're the smartest person in the room that put their backs up. So it's that mindset of knowing that you deserve to be there. You are part of a group and you're a peer, and it's very quick within a day or two how much the camaraderie of the group seals together, and that it becomes, we're all in this together and everyone's trying to pull each other up rather than push each other down. It's not like back in the day where people were sort of almost competitive against each other. It's very much a togetherness and how can I help you? If I finish my assignment, maybe I can come over, check on you and give some insight or feedback, or even just be a sounding board for you to bounce some ideas off. In terms of the structure and the way the courses have moved, back in the day, I think a lot of instructors seen themselves as gatekeepers of, it was very tough for me to get my license, therefore I need to make it very tough on the next generation to get their license. And it has shifted away from that. And it was something that stuck with me when I did my grassroots instructor license, was you're not a gatekeeper. You're not here to stop people attaining this license. Your job is, what can you do to increase the level of knowledge of those people that are on your course, to raise them up and raise the standards. You're very much a stepping stone in these people's career, in terms of, if you do your job well and competently and to a high level, you're going to inspire people to push on to the next license. You're going to raise their minimum standards. You're going to raise their sort of their own internal culture, and then that has a knock-on effect, obviously, to all the kids that we directly work with, and from a coach education standpoint, from the people that you're lucky enough to work with. Obviously, then you've got the extrinsic factors of learning the X's and O's and the assignments and of that. But as Richie touched on, the intrinsic benefits of both networking and building relationships. And it's something that Willow talked about in one of the previous courses of Sarge making him feel vulnerable and get out of his comfort zone. You know, a lot of these courses, you go in sort of defensive, and you can sit there and not try and contribute and not put your hand up and not speak your mind, view the fear of getting shot down. But we try and talk about normalizing error with players, allowing them to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes. So if it's okay for our players, why is it not okay for coaches? Why is it not okay for you to be vulnerable, put yourself out there, and make mistakes? We don't have all the answers. That's why we're on these courses. You know, or it's not even a mistake. It might be just a different perspective that someone gives you that gets you thinking along a whole new train of thought. And that's part of the growth process. And you know, Willow can speak about that. I know he's going through some coach ed stuff right now, and one of his mentors is very much putting him uncomfortable. And if it's okay for someone who's played at Man United and is, you know, a founder of a very successful business and has no need to put himself in those situations, but it speaks volumes to his growth mindset and his desire to increase, that he actively searches out those mentors to put him into those. I don't know if he's only got one anecdote and I've just stolen on him. He'll have nothing to speak about now.
I say you're worth your $10 as well, mate, for saying such stuff about him.
I know. Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna ask the question a different way to you. The experience from a coach education perspective and how it could benefit the players. So obviously you've walked into dressing rooms, you've been a new kid on the block. The experience that the boys have touched upon about that kind of humility, that willingness to be open, that, you know, the confidence and the trust in yourself, that you've earned the right to be there. Explain how coaches could potentially help players deal with it, with a similar scenario of kind of transitioning to a new group, or how it kind of impacts the mood in a dressing room when people walk in fresh.
I think there's distinct differences at different levels. If you're looking at a professional level, I think there needs to be a shared perception across key stakeholders when somebody new's coming into any dressing room, so they can facilitate that transition from one environment to another. So if you're going from youth elite up to senior professional level, there needs to be a shared perception of what this player, like a duty of care, what he needs. So the responsibility for the multiple coaches, for me, is be accountable for a little piece of that player's integration into that environment. Whether it's, you know, when you're going from certainly youth elite up to senior professional, there's generational gaps in knowledge, in banter, in lots of different aspects. So there needs to be somebody there that can support, not get in the middle of it, but help that player understand what he's about to walk into. And I think that's a position actually that's going to become more and more relevant and more prominent in the professional game. So we don't lose talented youth elite players because they go up into this cauldron of a first team environment that can be very, very scary, very detrimental sometimes to their growth and development if they can't communicate with first team staff. If they go into an environment where some senior pros are looking around going, whose place is he taking? He's taking my place? All right, I might be a smiling assassin. I might not want to accept that because I've got to put food on the table. So at an elite level, I think coaches have to have a plan in place to support that transition from one environment to another. At a college level, again, it looks different. When new players are being recruited and coming into a locker room, I think initially you have to lay out what the culture is, and what the challenges are going to be for you as somebody new, a little inexperienced coming out of high school and travel soccer, what the differences are in terms of commitment to train, speed of play, intensity of work. I think these things have to be really well thought out, so there's a process in place that really breaks down any fears or barriers that a new player might. One is he's going to be thinking about them, and as you alluded to in, I think, Rory and Rich, when you're on these coaching courses, sometimes it's better to sit back and hear the real message through the noise when people are trying to get the point across all the time, and they want to be the loudest, they want to be the smartest, they want to be the most innovative. I think it's important that every time somebody speaks, there's a message that comes out, and if you're able to sit back and remove yourself from the noise, and really listen to what somebody's saying, Again, that's part of the transition process for college coaches, bringing new players in, or professional environment, bringing youth players in. I think that can really have a big impact on how quickly somebody settles, so they can start to really perform in your environment.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating, and we'll segue really quickly into the professional game, seeing people like Jones at Chelsea, who have worked with the youth teams for many years, that are now on the first team staff, and obviously Kieran McKenna, who when he first went to Man United is now involved with the first team staff, and just that familiarity, Willow, as you allude to. Obviously that we've spoken, and Teresa was a great guest a few weeks ago to say we don't quite understand what this generation are going through. Even at the elite level, the demands placed upon the 17, 18, 19-year-olds now are very different to when you were coming through. So having people that they're familiar with, that are able to connect and maybe empathize with what they're going through, because perhaps on their own professional journey they weren't too far disconnected from it, I think is going to be interesting. Guys, we've banded around a few things. Lynchy, I had a couple of questions, but you covered them in your last answer about really the intentional shift towards self-reflection, collaboration, self-development that the courses are showing. You've both mentioned, but Richie, I'm going to ask if there's any personal anecdotes about being humble enough to make a mistake, to go first and to mess it up, to stand in front of a tactics board, as Lynchy said, and just be like, oh, okay, I'm stuck, and that it's okay to say I haven't got all the answers. Anything like that you can share from your own experiences?
Yeah, sure. And I guess one of the questions that we could pose to ourselves as coaches and to new coaches that might come into our environment, so whether you're a coach educator or you're a DOC, just asking people if they're willing to leave their ego at the door. We've all been in situations before where you get stuck and you might need a little bit of help, and in challenge comes the greatest opportunities for growth. And it's not just about being able to reflect upon your experiences, but the same way that there's practice and deliberate practice. We're saying that you can enrich practice by making it deliberate. There can be experience that you gain, and sometimes that's positive experiences. Sometimes it's you're stuck at the whiteboard and you don't know where to go. And being uncomfortable in those situations is a great opportunity to grow, but it only really happens if there's reflection and really deep reflection on the experience, and it's quality reflection on the experience, and that's where your opportunity to grow is. But yeah, asking yourself the question is, could I be wrong, and am I willing to leave my ego at the door? An example, you could say that I come up with some tactics around how I'm going to combat against your 4-4-2 diamond, and I'm going to play this way. And there can be an argument that says it either helps you to strengthen your thoughts and feelings that you have on the game to say, well, actually, no, I truly think that I think that I'm strong enough in my feelings that I think this is right for myself and for what I believe in the game. Or you get the other side, which is, if you are open-minded, it's is it possible that I could be wrong? And then if so, there's a great opportunity for growth there. So you either get a chance to strengthen your thoughts and feelings on the game, or you get a chance to open up your mind and grow a little bit further. But it often comes back to the person, Tom. And do you just have a growth mindset? Are you open-minded, and do you want to learn, and do you want to try and get better?
Couldn't agree more, mate. Lynchy, do you have anything where you dropped the ball? Anything that springs to mind where, looking at where you are now, that a younger coach or somebody who's perhaps a little less experienced could say, well, that little mistake is just a bump in the road, or it's a small hurdle to overcome on a long-term journey?
Yeah, no, and I'm on my A license, so again, is you want to go in, you plan to every single detail, and you're like this, especially when it's your opportunity to coach, you just want it to be perfect. It's funny, you come off the back of running 3-4 sessions a night, but for some reason this 20-minute segment of coaching is the biggest 20 minutes of your life at that point, and you obsess about it. You go into every single minute detail. So one of my practice sessions, we're up in Kansas at the National Development Center, so everything's state of the art, teams are in. start running the session, and I am in the nitty gritty, I'm in the details, and the session is just not working. Defense has been overrun. I can't understand why, and I'm so engulfed in the small bits and went straight into trying to jump the gun almost. And at the NDC, for anyone who's been there, they record all the sessions from a tower, and then they've got breakout rooms with TVs on, so you can go back. So before you get any feedback from anyone else, you're asked to go and reflect on your own session. So I knew the session was a car crash. You know, that was fairly straightforward. You know, everyone and their dog walking by saying that. But I honestly couldn't work out why. And you know, I'm dealing with individuals. So I went to the breakout room, pull up the footage, and I sort of sit there. And about 4 minutes into the session, I see that a player who was supposed to be a sub strolled into the session. So instead of my numbers being correct, they had an extra player. So I was being overrun in the final third because they had more men. So almost like my five-a-side, trying to sneak an extra sixth player in. So it's one of those where I was so engulfed in the small details and trying to correct around the ball that I didn't do. The first thing they told us was take a step back, get the ball rolling, take a step back, observe it. Is it organized? Is it running? Is it going the way you want it? And if it's not, it's fine. That's not a big deal. Fix it. Step in, and it was very much a learning moment for me. You know, I can laugh about it now. I wasn't so pleased at the time. But it meant that reflection became very, very valuable for me. If I went in and absolutely aced those 20 minutes, best session ever run, I would have left, and, you know, been already on my way to Danny's thinking that's all well and good, it's fine, move on. But instead, it still stuck with me to this day. And the first thing I do now in any session is take a step back, observe the big picture. Is it organized? Is it the way I want it to be running? If it's not, then it's okay. You step in, you correct those things before you get into the nitty gritty. And again, it's, you know, when you step up and present the next day in front of all your peers, it's very difficult to accept that I got this wrong. But that mindset is as Richie touched on, is really the fundamental mindset to allowing you to grow and get better. By, you know, I could have went in and blamed it on something else, or maybe no one else had seen it and just not used that footage and come up with an excuse, but it wouldn't have made me a better coach and allowed me to be vulnerable. So again, it's one of those small things that happens at every level. And it's just about how you take those experiences and how you allow them to shape your growth as a coach, as an individual, as a leader. As we said, you know, every day is a school day, everyone's learning at every moment. And it's about taking those opportunities and turning them into a strength.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to, for the benefit of any coach, or the benefit of any coach educator, there's just a couple of things that I want to kind of touch upon here. You've both spoken about courses are environments where there is a desire for people to demonstrate knowledge. You have to almost feel like you've got to display why you're there. And I think that goes back, Lynchy, earlier to what you were saying about trusting that you've earned the right to be there. So now when you do step up, understand that silence and observation are really key coach behaviors. And when you watch the best coaches work, they are the preferred behaviors of so many, because the specific details that we do get to look on, and the importance, as you said, of organization. But I think for me and conversations we have internally, the importance of the structure of the session being right. You don't know that if you're watching the ball. You don't know that if your head's on the tiny bits and pieces. Like, try to take a step back, be comfortable in silence, and make sure that the bigger picture is going in the way that you had kind of hoped and expected it to. And if you're a coach educator and you're working as a DOC watching people, again, anytime that people are being watched, there's a natural apprehension, or there's probably going to be an increased nervousness or anxiousness. So, you know, your ability to demonstrate the types of skills and characteristics that the boys referenced earlier, and make people feel comfortable and normalize mistakes, as you said, Rory, it's super, super critical. Richie, just a closing thought on the course itself, the biggest takeaway that you had, that you learned, that you acquired throughout your education process?
So you just chopped in out a little bit there, Tom. I think I might have caught what you said just about key takeaways from the course.
Yeah, single biggest key takeaway that you could share with anybody going through a process to try and get comfortable with beforehand.
Oh my goodness, this is a really difficult one. I think that if we go back to the conversation we mentioned earlier on about somebody like Didier, and always being able to show you that there's another level that you can go to, you know, question I'd have for you is can you impress yourself with the quality of your work that you put out? And then if you're going to reflect on your work, you can ask yourself the question, say, well, what does world class look like? Based on where I'm at right now, what would world class look like? And, you know, we can go through the same kind of process that they have on the US soccer courses, which is, you know, where am I now? Where's the desired goal? What's the gap? How can I bridge that gap? And then inevitably, how do I get there? And the other piece is who do I know that can help me get there? There's times where you're limited by your depth of knowledge, and sometimes you need somebody else to come in with a slightly different lens, a different perspectives, different experiences, and sometimes higher level experiences that can help you to see the gateway, you know, as to what was the next level look like. But, you know, closing thoughts for me, it was really a lot of deep reflection on what's the quality of my work like right now, and is it world class? And if it's not, then what do I need to do to get it there?
Yeah, and I think the specificity with which people operate is typically that difference, right? How deep can I go? How deeply do I understand? How specific can I be? Whether Lynch, you referenced Tony Carr earlier, and the specificity of his technical information, or Dick Bates, the tactical knowledge and the slight adjustments that he made to just change the whole dynamic of a session. So general and broad is basic, and then it will filter so that I'm looking to be able to impact things in a more finite detail. That's normally a characteristic for me of the best coaches, and then the quality is obviously simplifying that to the players with which they work. So Richie, I'm going to go back. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, mate.
I was just going to add to what you're saying, Tom, and I think that for the most part, it comes back to planning. So you think about when you're planning a training session, and the level of detail that you can get into is almost limitless. To the extent of, you know, I can just design activities and design a training session that I think is going to reach certain learning outcomes, but then I can go level up, and can I plan the periodization within each of the activities, and what does that look like? And then can I go level up again and say, well, which players are going to play on which teams, and does this make sense for the activity? And if I'm going to play with neutral players or bumper players, then how do they get circulated in and out, and how do we make sure that they still hit a certain demand within the session? And then if I was to feed into the next part of the session, what does that then look like? And it's just, you know, the points at which we're getting at, Tom, I think for the most part, like I say, it just keeps coming back to planning. It's how much time are you willing to dedicate as a coach to be able to say world class looks like this.
Yeah,
can I add something there? And Richard, that's a great point. I did my B license with the English FA and my A license with the Irish FA, Northern Ireland FA, and there was a point in the course where I was asked the question, do you want to be a development coach or a performance coach? And to your point, Richie, about being world class, you can be a world class U14 to U16 or U10 to U12 development coach. That looks very different from being a U18 to U21 with maybe first team players or players that are coming into a first team performance coach. And I've had a discussion of late with Sarge about this, and with Mike Phelan at United about this. When you think about context, you think about all of the amazing framework you get from your A license, and you think about the different layers, psychological, you think about the X's and O's and the tactical development. There was a page in a book I read recently that I discussed with both of them, and it was Pep Confidential, and Pep Guardiola asked to the person writing the book, we're playing, I think we're playing Leverkusen on Saturday. What formation would you play? Sorry, we've got a game on Saturday. What formation would you play? Who would you play? And the guy writing the book who's following him starts to reel off a team and a formation, and Pep says, hold it there. Who are we playing? What's the environment? What's their system? Who are their key players? And he lists off about 7 or 8 things before you even get to the point of, okay, this is how we're going to set up. We can either play a 3-5-2 or 4-3-3, lots of different things. But goes back to your point, Richie, about, and your point, Rory, about the key questions you ask yourself before you start to prepare a team for something, or before you prepare to start developing players, and a really critical piece. And that's why I think the context is always a key piece. Decide and define where you want to be world class, and then get after it. What level, performance, development, what you want to be, really define that first and self-reflect, and then get after it in whatever way you think is best.
Yeah, it's actually the most, you both brought up, it's the most thought-provoking question at debate I was on the receiving end of, and to all the coaches, not necessarily about practice design and not necessarily just about, you know, the quality of your session, but his broader question was, at what could you be world class? So don't care where you are, you've all got a quality and a skill set. What is it? We talk to players about developing a special weapon. Talk to coaches about what characteristic they have in their armory. That could they be world-class communicators? Could they be world-class tacticians? Could they be world-class innovators? Could they be world-class teachers? But it's one of those challenges that I think is always phenomenal. So thank you for that, guys. That was great. Richie, I want to go back to you on a question where I'm hoping, based on your day-to-day role, you're probably the most experienced at this when it comes to part of the coach education journey that US soccer at least are now suggesting is how to manage performance environments and how to continue to lead yourself. So can you speak to your experience of helping clubs introduce and implement a coach education program, and what it might look like, and any ideas that you could share for how people can support the development of their coaches within the programs that they work?
Yeah, sure. I'll do the best that I can, Tom. And look, I think that the stuff that you learn from a coaching course, it comes back to all this experience and all this knowledge that you gain on the courses. But for me, it comes back to, is it that you have uphill hopes and downhill habits, or can you have uphill hopes and uphill habits? So, you know, the easy thing is that you can just fall back into your job, and you can go back to your regular day-to-day work, or there's a level of accountability that you can have to yourself in order to start striving for a higher level. And, you know, one of the best things that I've ever done is just get really in tune with my phone in setting reminders. And it sounds so almost arbitrary that it's just setting a reminder, but when you set reminders all the time, and it's always just follow up on this, follow up on that, you start, this sort of stuff starts becoming part of your daily habits. And now you can start taking what you've learned on a course, and you can actually start really implementing it into an environment. But, you know, for coaches, if they're thinking about a coach education plan for their clubs, and really, I think you have to start with, what do I want it to look like on the pitch? So from that, what are the skills and the behaviors of the players? What does that need to look like? Now can I start designing practice activities that will help support the way that we want to see the game played? And you have to get really refined in that. Your rules, your incentives, your activity choices, and really ensuring that you're asking the question as to, is this going to help us to be able to see these specific behaviors from the players on game day? But now if we start thinking about the coach, it's a question now as a coach developer as to, well, what are the hard skills and soft skills that those coaches are going to need to acquire in order to be able to bring that to life in the training sessions, and then ultimately on the field on game day? So examples I could give you is something like your coach's ability to identify and correct errors. So what are the learning objectives? What are the activities of choice? Now, what is it that I could teach or plan on teaching within that activity? What are the likely errors that I'll see from the players? And then how does the coach interact with the players at the point when it's been identified that this is the error? So you can go even further than that and say, well, if I've been able to clearly identify that this is the problem, now I need to correct it. So what kind of soft skills does the coach have in terms of the interpersonal relationships? What kind of questions do they ask? How do they ensure that learning's taking place? And can they check for understanding? And can they be experts in asking really good questions? There's something that I kind of went out on a few years back to say, can I become an expert question asker? And again, it's a trait that a coach is probably going to need to have. So whether it's, like I say, it's your ability to identify and correct errors, your ability to plan for certain error, in planning for errors, a big Doug Lamov thing. I'm sure that your listeners have surely come across his work. He's phenomenal. Is it the organization and the flow? So if we want to minimize downtime and ensure that the ball's rolling enough throughout the session, then what kind of organizational things am I going to need to think about in order to transition from one activity to the next with minimum time in between, or calculated time in between if we're planning with periodization in mind, so that we can just keep flowing and the session can keep going. And again, it's hard skills, soft skills. What are the X's and O's and all of those details that the coaches need to be upskilled on? And then what do they need to be upskilled on in terms of the soft skills of the deepening of those relationships and making great experiences for the kids? And I'll finish with this thought, Tom, because I've heard a lot of people talk about culture at the minute, and we say, well, what kind of club do we want to be? Well, we're a family club. We're family orientated. You say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, I'm not sure what you mean. Well, tell me about what a typical interaction looks like with a kid when they get to practice. You say, well, I'll ask him how his day was. Okay, and what kind of answer do you get? Well, probably, yeah, it's good. Are we able to mute him?
No. Yeah.
Brilliant.
It's Ryan that was not on mute there.
Brilliant.
Brilliant.
All right, so I'll finish you off with that thought is what's the depth of the relationship that the coach has with the player? So we're saying again, hard skills are the X's and O's stuff and the planning, preparation, all that sort of stuff. The soft skills, how do I interact with the players? If I'm really living the values of the club in how we want to see the values come to life, then if we are a family orientated club as an example, can you take those relationships a little bit further? Can you ask players different types of questions when they get to practice? And maybe it's not how was your day, but what was the weirdest thing that happened to you at school today? What did you have for lunch? What was that the best sandwich you ever had? And it sounds silly, but it's just it's trying to deepen the connection that the coach has with the players. And as directors, it's questions like that. Is that how do you as a coach steepen that that relationship with the player? So it's about being really deliberate about everything that you are trying to as a coach, from the implicit stuff to the explicit stuff. And I think I hope I've rambled on for long enough to say that maybe I've answered your question.
I think you've safely answered it, mate. And I think the depth that you've gone into is going to be fantastic. I fear that if it took me a page and a half of notes to do it, and it's going to be deep for others. But no, Richie, thank you, mate. That was superb. And for me, the insight that you just shared is a great example to anybody listening of that trajectory and that transition towards world class, and the depth of deliberate thought that goes into practice design, culture design, and ultimately how you want your staff to operate within the club that you're responsible for running. So really fantastic, Richie. Thank you. Lynchy, close us out. There's a couple of questions that have come through that I'd be curious to ask, but I'm going to close with mine first. So, of all the stuff that Richie just shared, talk to me practically about how a DOC can go about providing opportunities for that type of development within their staffing setup. So the importance of structuring professional development, the importance of maybe non-formal learning and being guided towards resources that could help expand their thinking, the willingness for somebody in your position to be a mentor. Talk, just if you could, any advice for DOCs or technical leads?
Yeah, one of the biggest things is getting to know your staff on an individual basis. So as Richie touches on, when that interaction you have with players before your session and getting to know them on a real individual level, and that allowing you to have much more meaningful interactions with them, the same applies to your coaching staff. So being able to have that individual relationship with them, so you know their motivations, you know their desires, what are their ambitions. As Willow touched on, some people, not everyone wants to be coaching U18s. Like some people, that's their ultimate goal and that's their end goal, is they want to be, coaching at D1 college or in the pros or working up in the club to get to the 18s. And that's not everyone's motivation. Some people are excellent in the zone one and working with the younger kids, and they're going to graduate them into U12, 13, 14, and then they're going to come back and start a new project and bring it on. And if you know that's someone's motivation and you know that that's their wheelhouse and that's where they want to really be world class, as we touched on earlier, then you're able to support them differently than you are with the coaches that want to be in zone 3 and coaching the 18s. Once you get to know them on a personal level and get to know their ambitions, you can really tailor how you want to support them and their growth personally. So, obviously we talk about Coach Ed. Coach Ed isn't just working your way up to being an A licensed coach. Coaching education is this whole series that Beyond Pulse puts on. The first thing I do when I log in is I click into the participants and I try and see how many of my staff are there. All the same with all the other ones. Everything that's, Gary Cernine has opened up modern soccer coach community to everyone. And these are all fantastic resources that people can take advantage of, learn from people within the soccer community. And not everything you watch in an hour-long webinar like this is going to be relevant. But if you can take out one or two small bits that make you think and challenge the way you think and challenge the way you've always done things, and again, it might come back to Richie, where you become even more clear in terms of, no, I really, really am solid in my convictions and the way I do things, and it makes you really believe that. That's just as valuable than getting new information that might start to trigger you to think in a different way and maybe challenge the way you approach things, because you can't sit on the fence. You need to be 100% bought in and committed to both your club, because if you're not bought into your club philosophy and methodology, then the fit will never work. If you're not fully 100% in, then it's going to collapse and come apart somewhere down the line. But also in terms of your own convictions and your own beliefs and your own coaching philosophy and methodology and your own delivery, you need to be 100% steadfast in, I'm doing this. It's not to say you can't change it and you can't evolve it and you can't grow it, because every single philosophy and methodology should be a working document. If you ever say, this is the way we do things and this is done now, then you're putting yourself at the back burner, because the game evolves, people evolve, society evolves, and we all need to change with it. But in saying that, as you're delivering things, you need to be 100% bought in at that moment, while also keeping your mindset open to be able to change. So in terms of how you support your staff is first of all, having a culture, having a philosophy and a methodology that everyone can get behind, buy into, and really believe in. Then you have to practice what you preach. There's no point saying we're a club that's committed to Coach Ed if then you're not going to find time for your staff to go to a course, or you're not going to try and support them in that way. And then it's about finding individuals' motivations and trying to tailor it to those individuals of, how can I help you? It might be, let's grab a coffee and have a conversation because I know you're struggling with this parent. It might be, hey, I can put in a phone call and maybe get you on this course. It might be, hey, I'm going to cover your sessions this weekend, so you can go take your 11v11 grassroots course. It might be, hey, sending links, this webinar is on, this person's fantastic, John O'Sullivan's, he'll forget more about the game than we'll ever know. You should log on here and try and direct them towards it. You can then support them in that way. Obviously, then it comes down to each individual's motivation and growth mindset to actually embrace that, take it on, run with it, and challenge themselves to be better at what we do in terms of educators and teachers and support people for coaches. But it needs to be a tailored approach. It can't be, this is what we do. And then, like I said, each individual, then it's their responsibility to really challenge themselves and push themselves to be the best version of what they can be. And I'm definitely stealing Richie's quote of uphill hopes, downhill habits. Going to these courses, it's step one, but then actually implementing what you learn and putting that into your day-to-day and creating that as your norm and your regular is much more difficult than it sounds. It's easy to do it when you're on the course and you've got all the resources and the time to do it. It's very difficult, when you're planning for 3-4 teams and the challenges of life catch up with you. But that's the career we've chosen, the path we're on, and like I said, those that push themselves and want to be better will always find ways to do it.
Yeah, cracking answer again. I'm very conscious, so we're now at an hour. I'm going to wrap up my side of questions. I'm going to open it. Ivan on the line, interested by any of your thoughts. Obviously, that's kind of a pretty diverse background of where people are day to day right now. But Ivan asks, when hiring for your club, do you rate license level more importantly than good experience and work done with different teams? So how important is formal education? Any of you?
I'll jump on it. It's never one over the other. So it's never this person's an A licensed coach, therefore he's better than this other coach who's been coaching for 20 years. The licenses obviously shows a minimum competency. It also shows a growth mindset and a desire to want to get better and to put yourself through those. Like I said, some of these courses take up to a year, and that level of commitment definitely shows towards someone's character. So I put a huge amount of value on the license, but it is far from the only thing. If I see someone has a D license, I'm not going to all of a sudden say they're not qualified to coach at our club. But if I look at it and the D license was gained 10 years ago and there's been no continuous education since then, that gap speaks more volumes than the actual level of license. In terms of experience, you can go through the licensing and do the bare minimum and jump from the next to the next to the next and get very high, within a number of years. But are you then putting that learning and that experience into your day-to-day? Are you really doing the trial and error? We talk about reflection. Are you going out on the field and implementing it and then coming back, reflecting on it, really trying to grow? So it's very much a combination and collective. We talk about developing holistic players. The same as with the coach. When you look at an experience, you look at the licensing level to show competency and minimum competency, but also a desire to drive and be better. And then you look at their experience. And I was on a webinar earlier this week, and one thing that I got from that, which was fascinating, was when we put down references, we nearly always put down the reference of someone we worked for. And it's one of those, if I'm dealing with a superior, I'm always going to put my best foot forward. I'm always going to try and be on guard. And one of the things he spoke about when hiring staff was asking for people that worked under you. So be it a player, be it if you were in a management position underneath, because if you are in a management position, people don't always treat their staff as well as they might treat a superior. So if those who worked under you speak as highly about you as those that you directly report to, that speaks a lot about character. And one of the first things we recruit on at PSA is the character of a coach. We'll call around people who might know them, and the first question is, what's the guy like? Does he practice what he preach? What's his character like? And that goes into then obviously the licensing level, the experience level, because you can't hire someone off the back of just one of those categories.
Fellas, anything to add?
I call myself a non-academic, and I think there's a difference between academic education and then growth mindset and picking any book off a shelf like Doug Lemov, Paul Kirshner we talked about the other week, and anybody you want to read about and learn about. You can self-educate, of course, and I think it's critically important that post framework of licensing, you then start to bolt on different theories, different methodologies, different philosophies. So to Ivan's point, I think you start with two questions. One, what type of coach do I want to be and what age groups do I want to work with? And two, am I equipped to coach every step, every layer, every building block across the technical, tactical, psychosocial, physical, to all of the individual personalities that come into my environment? If you're a coach, if you're a DOC, then you're asking, can I deliver education to them based on those specific requirements? And the chances are, if you haven't been on a license, it's going to be a no, because I'll be honest, even all of the environments I experienced as a player, from professional level to even going into youth academies before I came to the US and work with youth teams and reserve teams for a short period before I came to the US, I didn't have the framework to build processes to then build them into a structure that could serve my team year round or in a period I schedule. So I think licensing is the cornerstone, the foundational piece to allow you to then plug in all of the different educational resources and areas you want to go after and really refine and develop yourself. So now I'm going after the psychosocial, neuroscience, behavioral piece to really plug into my framework of my licenses. And I'm trying to fill that area as much as possible, because I'm now turning my value towards the interpersonal relationship piece. How can I help players unlock themselves? So I think Ivan, licensing is a must, despite the vast amount of experience you may have or other people around you may have. I think it's the glue that holds everything together. So I think it should be a prerequisite if we're working with kids, children, and teens.
Richie, anything to add?
Yeah, I'll just try and keep it short. To echo Mark and Rory's point, I think that it shows a commitment to the game and commitment to wanting to be a coach, wanting to have this as your profession. So the acquisition of coaching licenses is definitely important, but for me, there's that part is only a piece of the puzzle, and that's what will get you in the door for an interview. But at the point when you have an interview, I think that there's deeper questions that need to come out, which is really more discovery of the person. And as an example, like at Red Bull, there's our core values are trust, passion, and selflessness. So can we ask questions of coaches that would help to reveal how they might deal with certain situations, that would be revealing of whether they are trustworthy, passionate, would they be selflessness, are they good teammates? So again, it comes back to the values of the company, and the hard skills of getting coaching licenses, definitely a really important part, because they need to be able to coach it, to teach the game. But that's something that we can also upskill them on. So there's some intangible things that we definitely look for as well, and personality is a huge part of that.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, mate. And yeah, really, really insightful there. I am going to call that, guys. So on behalf of obviously myself, Willow, Team Beyond Pulse, everybody listening now and on demand, Rory, Richie, thank you ever so much for your time and your insight. We spoke about the need for humility. You've demonstrated that, both of you, but obviously the education, the experience, the intuition that you've been able to share as well. It's fascinating. So thank you very much for the contribution. Thank you for your time. Just a real quick one, Richie, Twitter handle, where can people find you? Obviously you've got the analysis posts as well. So how can people go learn a little bit more from you?
Yeah, Twitter is at RichScott285. I'll shoot it in the chat section, or I can share it with you so that you can post it. Yeah, LinkedIn as well. I'll share both of those. But just to finish as well, by the way, sorry, and I know that we're conscious of time, but just genuinely really appreciate you guys thinking of myself and Rory to have us on, and the work that you guys are doing is inspiring the soccer community in a difficult, challenging time right now. You guys are doing a phenomenal job, so well done. Thanks.
Thank you, mate.
I'll be honest, for me, guys, that was really fun. There was a lot of depth and a lot to unpack that you could spend another hour on. This has been one of my favourite webinars so far to date. So a lot of fun. Enjoyed that one.
Lynchy, that's you getting your beer back, mate. That's from the little prep at the start. Rory finishes off. Where can we find you?
Rory Lynch 9 on Twitter, LinkedIn, and then rlynch@princetonsoccer.org. If anyone has any questions, sort of club wide, or and then other than that, again, mirrors what Richie said. Look, really appreciate you boys taking time out of your own busy schedules to provide for the coaching community and give back, and what Beyond Pulse is doing, and we appreciate you having us on.
Yeah, you're very welcome, mate. Okay, listeners, thank you for being here again. Whether you're live or tuning in later, it's really appreciated that you take the time out of your day to check in and try to be better. And obviously at these testing times, as the boys have said, that the coaching community is rallying together. So thank you everybody for your company this week. We will have information over the weekend about what week number 3 looks like, and we hope to see you there. So thanks again, guys.